All right, and we are a couple of minutes, 3 minutes late. Thank you to everybody who was already here. More love, more blessings. Hi, first comment. Welcome to Sahel Tuesdays, guys, where we get to learn about geopolitics and other African countries. Obviously, it's inspired by what's happening in the Sahel region with Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, and we are completely inspired by the politics going on there. So, as usual, I'm rolling with Dr. Khanyi and Oladele, and I'm going to hand over to them to do their introductions and their opening comments. But tonight we're talking about what's the word again? Independence. Independence.
Yeah.
Why can't African countries find full sovereignty? Good evening, Dr. Khanyi.
Good evening, Ntsiki. Good evening, Imagine Al Kebulan and all the other platforms that are on. It is Sahel Tuesdays once again, and we are on a very, very important topic. What is independence? Who is independent? Those who are not independent, why can't they be independent?
Yeah, greetings everybody. Welcome to another Sahel Tuesday as we break it down. Obviously, we all know what's going on in the Sahel region, the Sahel trio, basically. This is the aspiration that all African countries to be aiming for, but for some reason they're not. So we're going to be breaking it down. Okay, Mama, okay. I think you want to let go.
Thank you so much. So to look at what is independence, who of the 54 countries are independent, and those who are independent, why are they independent? Those who are not independent, why are they not independent? We decided to focus on three things that define independence. And we want to tackle them in their order of priority. So the first one is called territorial integrity. Territorial integrity is actually enshrined in the United Nations Article 2, paragraph 4. It states that in territory of a people cannot be balkanized. To balkanize is to subdivide into pockets, meaning you who in that territory cannot invade them by force to divide them into little pockets, because that is their territorial integrity. They have a right over that mass of land or ground which defines who they are. So essentially, territorial integrity speaks to oneness of a people or oneness of a state, and it is protected in the United Nations, international law, and other pieces of legislation and other international bodies. So by right, what happened to Iraq by America invading them was illegal, and it was a criminal offense if we look at territorial integrity as a principle of the law. Next to territorial integrity, I thought we should look at national sovereignty. Because once you have that piece of land, that gives you sovereignty over that land and protection by international law, meaning no one should use force to invade you over that declared territory. National sovereignty is your ultimate power and independence to rule that territory, meaning it's your supreme authority as a people and as your government without external interference, meaning over that piece of territory, you have a right to determine what you want. It leads us to the third principle. It's called self-determination. Self-determination is simple. It simply means you have a right to determine which economic model you want to follow, which system of government you want to follow, which internal policy do you want for your people, meaning your public services, how are they ordered and organized? We know for South Africa, for instance, we all have criticized the government of Ramaphosa. We say he came to privatize public services. it is not his right to do so because he didn't consult the people of South Africa. So your right over your public services, your economic model, your right over your what we call your foreign relations policy. Who do you define as your friends and who do you define as your enemies? That's self-determination. So all together, these principles, I'll go all over them again and I'll give over to my brother Oladele. It's territorial integrity. It speaks to the mass of land, your borders. Who do you define as yourselves? Because it's tied to the land. Then it's national sovereignty. Do you have the right as a nation to determine what happens within your nation? It leads to self-determination. Are you able to determine your own governing systems? Be they economic, be they educational, be they political, be they social, be they religious, be they spiritual. Those are all the things that speaks to an independent nation. And then in a while, we will determine who in the 54 countries enjoys these three principles. My brother Oladele.
Thanks for the start, sis. I'm going to be learning from you today because I know you're the authority in this topic. And what I'm going to start with, basically, as you've basically defined those three steps, my question to you, because I'm going to ask you the question, so we can start from there, is, and I'm going to come always coming as a Nigerian, because I look at the country that I know. Obviously, Africa is we're all the same, in the same boat, apart from the three nations that we're focusing on today. I can categorically say that Nigeria as a country is not, we haven't got the national sovereignty that you just referred to. We haven't got the territorial integrity, and we haven't got the self-determination. Despite the fact that we had flag independence, and they gave us flag independence, but did they truly give us all those three things that you just stated? That's my question to you.
Thank you very much. You're making it hard for me to talk about Nigeria when there is a Nigerian in the audience who knows better.
So you're free. You're free.
But I'm an African. Yes, I'm an African. I think I will put it to you that it is not a question of Nigeria. It is a question of there are 54 countries in Africa. Currently, until the latest, which is the Sahel, that is Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, no African country can claim even one of the three principles. I'm not saying all three together, which European countries enjoy, especially the former colonizers who run the United Nations, which America enjoys, which Canada enjoys, Australia, New Zealand, some countries in Asia. In Africa, not a single country enjoys one, not all three put together, which you all need to declare yourself as independent. The Sahel, the reason why they are trending is because they are enforcing their right over their territory, over their nation, over their self-determination. Because remember, self-determination, I said, it is your prerogative. Once you enjoy national sovereignty and you enjoy territorial integrity, you then, under self-determination, chart your own course or system of governance. That includes your natural resources. They are a chief cornerstone of your self-determination, because you cannot be self-determining if you don't have the domestic resources to run a country. And chief of that really is the money. Let's just put it in plain language. Chief of those domestic resources is government revenue to be able to protect that territory so that you can enjoy territorial integrity. It is government revenue to be able to protect the nation so that you can enjoy national integrity. So that you don't end up like Saddam Hussein, killed like a dog, but you are a sitting president. So that you don't end up like Libya, Gaddafi, you are killed like a dog, your country is balkanized, it's invaded without United Nations sanction, because not all United Nations countries voted for that attack. For Iraq, it's even worse. They were denied. America was denied. But because they have might of power militarily, they still invaded anyway. So for me, I would say not a single except the three, and it's recent, and we are still watching them. Because if America decides tomorrow to invade the Sahel, and France, as they keep threatening, as they are teaming up with terrorists currently in those countries so that they destabilize internally, when they decide to invade, the national sovereignty and territorial integrity goes. It means the countries would have failed to protect themselves. So I would say two things determine that, my brother Oladele. It's the government's domestic resources, chief of which is money, as I said. Two, it is your military prowess, sadly. We can talk until we are blue, all we want, and talk about public service and the best education system and the best that. If your military cannot protect your territory, if your military cannot protect the nation and the people, if your military cannot protect your self-determination, that is your right to determine who your friends are and what socio-economic system you want to follow and what foreign policy you want to follow. If those two things are absent, you are as good as colonized. You are as good as not free, which is why the Sahel is so attractive at the moment, because they are strengthening their military so they can be able to protect their territory and their nations, and so that they can be able to self-determine. They are also raising the resources that they need for governing. Domestically, meaning what? They are using their naturally endowed resources to leverage so that they can raise revenue for governing. I mean, governance is a very expensive process. It requires money. So I think I would leave it there and say, I hope I've answered you. It is not a Nigeria issue. It's funny, before we started, I came early to the studio. I was at a backstage. I asked, which is the richest African country? And then I never thought that they'll say South Africa. They said South Africa because I always thought DRC has got more natural resources. Apparently we have. But I mean, rich as we are, we still are a country that has the most disparities in terms of the rich and the poor. So for me, we are pretty much like any other African country because those natural resources aren't doing anything for us. We also, I know it is said in Africa, we have the strongest defense force, but like I always joke people, and it's really, it's a sick joke because it's the truth. We can't hold our own against Belgium, a whole continent of 54 countries. We cannot hold our own against Belgium, which is a minute European country militarily. So no, I would say no, my brother, and then I'll give it back to you.
Just saying that because I'm looking at you're talking about the wealth. Who's the richest? This for me, and I love to counter this. They always use the GDP, the gross domestic product. This is basically a Western parameter that has no bearings on Africa at all. So why? Because on LinkedIn, people always use that yardstick and parameters to say who's the richest, the poorest, and I'm always arguing, whose parameters does that really actually reflect in your country? Do you see that wealth in the majority of the people? So why are you using the colonized methods to gauge your progress, which there's none of it? So yeah, you want to speak to that because it's kind of funny how people use the GDP, because GDP, what does it mean? For me, wealth means the people in the country have the buying power and are empowered to basically afford what they want, and there's no poverty. So anything beyond that makes no sense.
Thank you so much. It's a very painful topic. That's why I'm smiling so much and trying to laugh it off. It is my self-coping mechanism because it makes me realize that a continent of 1 billion people since Ghana 1957 is still not free. We are
1.4 billion, sis. 1.4 billion.
Why 1.4 billion? Thank you, Oladele. Yes. We are still not free. GDP, gross domestic product, is tied to macroeconomics. Macroeconomics is the centerpiece of what is called neoliberalism. It's an economic system. It is when capitalism has gone beyond the capitalism of who's the guy that founded capitalism? Adam Smith. It's when capitalism has gone beyond Adam Smith, because under Adam Smith, which is where America was when they came with the American dream, when you work hard, or you go to school, you get a degree, and then when you finish in December, by January, February, at least of the following year, you have a paying job that is commensurate to your education, where you can afford to buy a car, you can afford to buy a house, you can afford for your head to be above water. You are not under the water living from paycheck to paycheck, where when you lose your job in 3 months, you are no longer working class. Actually, you belong to those who live below the poverty line. That was Adam Smith. Now, macroeconomics, which is GDP that you talk to, is not Adam Smith's capitalism. It is neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is the most demonic system any self-respecting country can choose as an economic model, because under neoliberalism, capital exists for the sake of capital. You heard me say we raise resources, domestic resources, for governance, so the state can govern, so the people can prosper. But under neoliberalism, capital exists for the sake of capitalists, meaning what? The rich become richer and the poor become poorer. Because this gross domestic product we are talking about, firstly, is tied to what is called Forex, which is what all our economies are tied to. So under neoliberalism, the more foreign reserves you have, the richer you are. Now that Forex, remember, is not determined by us. You know, it is said there are 3 rating agents currently. S&P, Standard & Procter, Moody, and I forget the third one. I'm sure you can look it up as we speak. There are 3. All 3 are American. They determine the currencies of nations. So immediately you say Forex, you are telling me that the exchange rate of a rand to a dollar is 18 rand something. Right there, you want me to have foreign reserves. Those foreign reserves are making the holder of the dollar, the pound, and the euro more richer than me, because when translated to my currency, I lose all the time. Macroeconomics also speak to foreign direct investment, which is the same thing, because you need that Forex, you need that dollar, that pound, that euro. You are encouraging more companies to come and invest in your economy. And in the process of them investing in your economy, they get something that we call tax breaks. You know, they don't pay tax, some for 12 months, some for this month. We are begging them. Actually, we call it the race to the bottom. Whereas 54 countries, we are begging such and such a company to come, and we are giving them the best conditions according to them, but the worst according to your people. Because like payment of your people, investment in the public service, they say reduce spending in the public service, meaning pay workers less. They want less taxation. They want tax breaks. They want. But what are you getting? So I hope I'm not taking too much and talking alone. But yeah, I think that's why I would say we should not be looking at GDP as an elective for development. The contrary, actually. Just a quick example. It's funny, the spirit speaks, because you're asking me this. It's another thing I looked at when I came early into the studio. It is said that Botswana is the best example of a country that has maximized on diamonds. So it is said 40% of its GDP comes from diamonds. AI then says Botswana is by far, of all African countries, the one country that spends more on education. But I have a question. Is the economy growing enough to absorb all those educated people? Where are Botswana seeking for opportunities, like all of us, in Europe, in America, in South Africa, wherever? Because is the economy growing enough? Yes, you have all that investment in education, but because you are following macroeconomics, your economy is not growing enough to absorb those people that we are producing under the so-called best education. So I think I'll bring it back to you, my brother Oladele.
So in a nutshell, basically what you're saying is, and I'm going to reiterate what Mama Khanyisile said, is that for those who are listening on LinkedIn, YouTube, wherever you are, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you're listening, when we say that we can never use the systems of the colonizers to free ourselves. This is exactly what we're saying here. We as Africans, and I say this all the time when we broadcast, we as Africans need to develop our own systems. We need our own Afrocentric systems devoid of the foreign interference. I know they're not going to stay away because they're going to keep poking their nose in. As you can see what's going on in the Sahel region with Burkina Faso, they're going to keep trying. But until we take the steps, and that means everybody, it's not just the leaders, it means the people gathering together, creating communities to do the needful. And I've said it before, most of we Africans are so lazy that we're looking to fit into systems that were created for us, not by us, for us to function. Consequently, you can see where we are today because so many of us, like Mama said, some of us are so educated. You're so Western educated, you become Negropeans in your thinking that all your solutions are Western solutions, which has no bearings in how you fix your own continent. That's why we are where we are. So when we're talking about sovereignty as a continent, the fact that using a Western education to solve your own problems means we haven't got the sovereignty because we haven't got the sovereignty in the head between our ears. It's basically using their prognosis to diagnose yourselves, if that makes sense. So guys, I know we keep saying this, and I'm going to keep saying this. It doesn't matter how educated you are. If you do not re-educate yourself to find African solutions, Afrocentric solutions in terms of liberating ourselves, we're going to keep talking. And thankfully, I say thankfully, Ibrahim Traore and the two other countries, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, are giving us a blueprint for the way forward. This is basically, yeah.
So, we're speaking about sovereignty here, right? And what it means and having power over your own resources and stuff. However, the reality of our situation is that power is in economics, right? It's in the markets. It's in the value of the finished products. And I want to understand, what will sovereignty look like then? With whichever country you look at in Africa, because we are made up of a myriad of things that are working together so that we can have these lives where we've got cell phones, we've got laptops.
Speakers, I can't see Ntsiki, I can't see Oladele Dosunmu. You posted that you guys are, and then AJ, you are saying.
Can you hear me, Ntsiki? Okay. I can't hear you.
I don't think Mom can hear us.
No, she can't hear us.
I don't know what or no refit. Do we think it's strategy to form an alliance as Africa? We should stop looking east or west. I think Bantu Biko told us this in the 70s. Relation we form with either the east or the west. It should be that he wants. And I hope from the rhetoric that we hear from him that he was very careful in ordering that contract. And Russia not being the West, I hope that they did, because they are not a former colonizer of Africa, it's a fact. I hope that they respected what he put in that contract as the precondition. So because they call it a global economy, which is really nothing, it's neoliberalism, as I said, we need to be smart. We need to work smart, not hard, AJ. So let's form these alliances, but can we determine the contract and not let the contracts be determined for us like we have been doing? Also, can we walk away from the dollar, the euro, and the pound, guys? Can we de-dollarize? Can we de-euronize? And can we de-pounderize, if there's such a word? Because we know by now from experience that since colonization, those economies have done nothing but exploit us. And they've tied our economies to their economies. That's why in the former French colonies, of which the 3 Sahel countries in question are, the economy is tied to France. In the former British, the so-called Anglophone, it's tied to Britain. And in the former Lusophone, former Portuguese, it's tied to Portugal. So can we disentangle? Because that knotting, that entanglement is happening because our economies are tied to those people. I'll give it back to you, Ntsiki and Oladele.
All right. I think you were struggling with your network, Mom. If you can log off and log on again, because I was actually asking you a question. I don't know if Oladele wants to add something quickly, but I think I'm going to wait for you, Mom Kanye, so I can ask my question again.
Okay.
So you can't hear me currently?
We can hear you now, actually.
We can hear you. Oh. It's just that your screen is hanging, but we can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can hear you perfectly, yeah.
Okay,
let me leave and come back.
Okay.
Now I'll leave and come back while
Okay.
Okay. Based on your question, I've basically written quite a few articles. The last one I wrote was basically how do we build Afrocentric economic solutions devoid of the colonial influences. I wrote that a couple of days ago, and the conclusion to that was that Africa had systems in place before colonialism came into play. We had our systems in place, and our systems were not tied to capitalism. They were not tied to materialism. They were not tied to consumerism, because all these isms that we embrace in Africa today are new things on our continent. We never tied our economies to none of those things. Obviously, we are here today, and reality is basically a lot of us are so sold out to the capitalism, consumerism. Everybody wants their bag and all this kind of stuff. But there's something we can do. If you don't know, if you get lost going forward, you need to go backwards, retrace yourself to know where you come from. In 2025, we can use the foundations that we had in the past to build where we need to go in the future. We have the Ubuntu system. I talked about Agbajowo. We had the Susu system. We had basically systems all over the continent that we used. And all these systems are based on community's needs. It's not about what you want, it's what you need. And we built on that. What Africans need to do, and which is basically a lot of the educated mind cannot comprehend this. Because every one of them thinks that if they haven't got their flashy car and their house and anything, they can't exist. And this is basically with the weakness of Africans, because we love the trinkets of the mirror so much that we value everything that we have is tied and valued into our importance is tied into those things. And this is basically why we struggle to actually go back and rethink, okay, how can we redress the balance and make things right? And I say this, guys, if the majority of the continent or the majority of the people are poor, there's no point in you having your flashy cars, because at the end of the day, you're just one. You're just what's it, how they call it? The one-eyed man in the middle of the blind. It makes no difference. So my conclusion was basically this, and I keep saying that this is what we need to do. We need to go back to what we had and then build on it and rejig it to fit into where we are today, based on our resources, based on the youth, because basically Africa has the biggest youth population in the world. We have the massive, why don't we leverage that capacity to our advantage? Bring them into it. We got tech. Why don't we use that to our advantage? Okay, we got the land. Why don't we use that to our advantage? Because basically, we have everything we need. The challenge we're facing now is we don't want to look inwards to look outwards. We're always looking outwards to look inwards. And that's basically where we're faltering. Mama K, you want to come back?
Thank you, Mama Kanyi. The question was that what does sovereignty look like? Because we've become so dependent on what our freedom is inside the colonial things, inside the things, the white people things. So when we say we want sovereignty, what do we mean? Do we mean that we cut off everything Western? Do we kick out all other races? What does sovereignty actually look like? What is it?
I think it depends. You need to dissect sovereignty into two if you want that answered accurately. There is national sovereignty, there is territorial sovereignty. Both of those two things produce self-determination. Territorial sovereignty means you have a jurisdiction, an area that you call your country, which you can protect and defend. And sadly, currently, of the 54 African countries, I don't think any of us can protect our national sovereignty, our territorial sovereignty from external aggression. So for those people who criticize Traore for buying large defense package from Russia, and they said, what is he doing? The people can't eat. I'm just like, you don't understand the principles of self-determination. If you have ground in any military language, and I speak now as a former guerrilla and as a former admiral, if you have ground, you need to be able to hold that ground in military language. Holding the ground means being able to protect it against external aggression. That's what sovereignty looks like territorially. National, it means you have the right to determine, America, I don't like you. I think I prefer North Korea over you. Just like Ntsiki, there are people who don't like you. They prefer 702 black people over you because we are too Pan-African for them. They don't like me for the same reason. They like 702 people and don't like us for the same reason. We are too radical for them. It is a choice. Now, states are supposed to be able to have that choice. South Africa should not be scared to say, Traore, we embrace you. For a people who got liberation through a guerrilla movement, which Sankara gave a heated speech saying, I am anti-apartheid and I stand behind Umkhonto weSizwe. Today, we are scared as a government to embrace Traore, means we don't have national sovereignty. We are scared that the DA will say, why are you embracing a dictatorship? Because that's what they call them. But the same DA can openly embrace Israel. So those things, for me, determine national sovereignty. It's got nothing to do with, are you expelling people? Are you going back to who we are going back to wearing skin hides? No, that's fluffy. Can we talk about the real things that matter? The real things that matter currently that render us not independent is that we cannot defend the territories over which we govern. Two, we cannot determine the systems of governance that we want to use. They are those systems imposed on us, which is the hatred that they have for the Sahel, and which is why they call the 3 Sahel countries military dictatorships. It is a form of governing system they have chosen. Why are we opposed to it? That's what they've chosen, to take them to national sovereignty. They see that if we follow what the other 51 countries are doing, 3 generations will come and we will still be walking the same pace or the same road. So they've decided to quicken our arrival at self-determination. We shall use our militaries to get there. What are we using the other 51 countries is the question we should be asking ourselves. We are still following the same pattern that was laid down for Ghana after Ghana took Nkrumah out and embraced globalization. It is the same system. We are all falling in the same pitfall like sheep led to a slaughter. So I hope I've answered you, Ntsiki.
Yeah, it's because I think that's what the people are struggling with, because when they imagine an Africa without white people, then they fear they fear which they're gonna lose their Apple Macs and their cell phones and their so I think that people don't know what do you actually mean, and if sovereignty is dependent on the economy and none of the African countries own their own economies, is it even realistic to even have this conversation?
Yeah, but you know what? We're having the conversation. Sorry, Mark, we're having the conversation because the three that we're highlighting are doing that. And basically, they are showing us the way to do it. Like Mama K is saying, we need to do, you know what? We cannot keep saying it's not possible. We could, anything we set our hearts to, our minds to, we can do. For me, nothing's impossible. The only thing that stops you is your brain, your thinking. If you want to do it, you'll do it. The South three got here today because they decided enough is enough of the colonial system, the hegemonic system. We don't want to follow that path no more because basically it's not benefiting our people. You know, the bourgeoisie or the elite, the Oxford educated, the Harvard educated Africans are the ones benefit because basically they're groomed to be in those positions. They're the ones that are groomed to be there, and that's why they are there. And that's why they rub shoulder. They're the ones who, once they get the trinkets and mirrors, they're the first to get the house in France, in the UK. They have, that's basically them. But what about the others? And I keep saying this, sovereignty means that majority of the country are empowered. We have resources to do what we need to do within what we have. Guys, your trinkets, your mirror, your iPhones and all that's fine. Okay, 2025, another Gen Z and whatever, that's all you know. But within those parameters, we can actually build what's us. We have the ability. The diaspora has the ability to do all these things. We don't lack nothing. The only thing we lack is the intention and the will to pull together to do these things without thinking that the white man is our solution. Guys, we are the origin of civilization. We were before the Caucasians came into existence. We built civilization before they came into existence. So we had the ways. Our arithmetic, our spirituality, everything was African. They just plagiarized and copied most things. And then they rehashed it and they sold it back to you. Understand that. The moment you understand that, then you know there's nothing you cannot do if you put your minds to do it. So Africa, we are our own solutions. Basically, we're smarter than, and I don't want to go there, but we're smarter than what you think. Okay, even research has shown that we are. Because I know there's scientific evidence to show that we have particular, I don't know, there's a 5 or 6 in terms of our abilities. So yeah, I'll let Marke. I don't want to.
I think I want to take on the 2 comments that came. People disagree. They say power doesn't lie in the economics. It lies in the emancipation of the colonial mentality. You cannot separate the 2 Africans. That's why I said last week, internet politics as it is taught at university currently will tell you Africa has gained political independence, but not economic independence. Even as we speak, that's what we regurgitate. That's the most nonsensical statement I've ever heard. You cannot separate the 2. You can't be politically free if you are not economically free. If you are economically free, automatically you are going to be politically free. So mental emancipation is not happening precisely because we don't have territorial integrity, because they tell us what our territories should look like. They tell us what should happen in our territories. So we don't have to, and we can't defend those territories. We are always at the constant threat of being invaded in those territories. 2, we don't have national sovereignty, meaning we can't decide tomorrow to say, away with neoliberalism, we are going to adopt Ubuntu. That's why when I speak in these meetings, I always say, I dare our President Cyril Ramaphosa to wake up tomorrow, Ntsiki, and say, I stand with North Korea. From now on, we are going to trade with North Korea with our gold and what and what. I dare him to say so, and I want to see how the rand will catapult from $1 to 18 to $1 to 200 overnight or in 3 days. No national sovereignty. Territorial sovereignty and national sovereignty produce self-determination, which is where the people who are about mental slavery are. If you don't have those two things, you can't even decolonize mentally. You can't say, what were we before we made the dust that we are? Because in essence, you don't have territory. You don't have a nation because you are still a colony. You are still governed. So you can't even get to that decolonization, this mental slavery that we are talking about. Thank you, Ntsiki. I'll bring it back to you.
I think that's the point I was trying to make, is that we have nothing. So the reason that the rand can flip and change according to DA is because the people who are in DA are the ones who are holding the economy. That's why I was asking Wuti, then what's even the point of this, having this conversation, if we don't, like, as you said, having political emancipation does not translate to economic emancipation. However, having economic emancipation does translate to political emancipation. So then it comes back to the issue of the economy then.
Yes, it comes back to the economy. But don't forget, we own the land. The land is ours. It's meant to be ours, but put it this way, they flipped it. 80% of it's owned by probably, what's the percentage in your country? They own the land. So basically what they've done the dirty on us, in terms of they gave you the flag independence, but they took your resources. They control your resources. So, and this is basically what these three are doing. You know, they kicked him off the military base. They kicked him off. They nationalized the gold mines. They control the uranium. Like Mama K is saying, this is basically what we need to control our resources. Until we, and this is, I'll say this again. Freedom is not cheap. There has to be sacrifice made, guys. And like we know, Ibrahim Traore, probably about 18 times. The recent one was just this month. They tried it, they threatened his life again. And this is a guy, a 37-year-old man who's willing to, he's not married, he has no family. That's probably why he's there, because it's not going to be no collateral damage, or they can't hold him ransom. That's why they chose him for this job. And he was chosen. So for us to free ourselves, we need to stop. And I use the word, bring proximity to whiteness is basically what I'm looking for, man. We need to get away from that, guys. We need to do the work. We need to make sacrifices. We basically need to, and I said, I'm a grandfather now. And I look at the legacies that we're leaving behind. And I'm thinking, what kind of life are my grandchildren going to live in? Because I'm in the UK right now, and the UK looks bleak. What they're building for the people here looks bleak. And then I'm hopeful that we have Africa. But then they're bringing the death economy from the UK to Africa. So how are we Africans going to breathe life into our own economy, getting away from the death economy that the West is imposing on us? That's the question. Because we cannot continue because don't forget, guys, the moment they stepped into Africa, we start to degenerate. Things start to go backwards. What does that tell us? That whatever we embrace, whatever we're doing, it's not working. And these guys, they would decimate the entire world to get what they want. They don't give two hoots about how they destroy nature naturally. So they'll kill human beings, kill nature to achieve what they want. And we Africans think this is the way forward. Make it make sense.
Yeah, I think, Ntsiki, truly, it boils back for me not to even the economy, because that's why I said we are going to define these three principles in their order. You start with having territory that is sovereign, meaning you can defend it. 2, a nation that is sovereign, meaning you can defend your people. Then the 2 produce self-determination. Then you can start saying, what were we before we made into the dust? Or we had Ubuntu. Or patriarchy is not ours. It came with the 2 colonial religions. Or so the gender construct of pre-colonial Africa was called a fleeting gender, or a loose gender. I'm looking for the word that I've used in the book, where gender was not cast in stone. You can't begin to ask those questions at the third level, that is self-determination, if the two are not assured. If your territory over which you govern is not assured because you can't defend it, because also it was fixed for you. If the nation was fixed for you, and I'm going to now Ntsiki border on dangerous ground, but I have to. In Africa can truly claim to have been pre-colonial nations. They've always existed. How many? All of us are colonial pockets. Are you aware? What is Kenya? Because there was no Kenya. There were Kamba people, there were Kikuyu people, there were Luya people. All those people weren't just people. They had territorial integrity, they had national sovereignty, that had self-determination, meaning that social systems which they used to govern their people. It goes for all of us except very few countries like Lesotho, Botswana, or Eswatini, because they've always been like that, albeit even that with tongue in cheek, I say it, because there's land in Mpumalanga and Mozambique that actually belongs to Eswatini, so they've also been remade. There's land in the Free State that belongs to Lesotho, so there is land in the Northwest that's supposed to be one with Botswana. So for me, it's like these nations were created colonially to fit the colonial agenda. That's why it's so hard for us to detangle and decolonize, because they tied the economies of these nations to their economies. So you need a radical approach, which is what we are seeing with the 3 Sahel countries. That's why they are saying we are not using democracy, because under democracy, the same former colonizer funds their puppets to emerge and win. Then nothing changes, because the system is kept the same. It's just the faces that are changing. So they've decided, no. We put this to a stop, no more. We shall determine our own self and national sovereignty. We shall, even if you call us putschis, as Traore say, even if you call us coup d'etats, we will use these coup d'etats in the end to protect our territory, to wield a nation so that we can get to self-determination. So yeah, I think I'll bring it back to you, Ntsiki.
Yeah, this one is tricky because, I mean, even when you go to family gatherings, the uncle that they listen to is the one with the money. So it really does boil down to economics. And that's why it's so scary, because our economy is in the land, I get, and we don't have the land. So that's what I was saying, is there even a point in having these conversations, or are we just frustrating ourselves because we don't even have the bare minimum to even have this dialogue? You know, we're like, I don't know, am I being pessimistic?
No, actually, it's funny. I hope that he has tuned in. So through the Sahel Thursdays, because they were Thursdays, we were found by a PhD student who is Burkinabe. That's what we call people from Burkina Faso. Please, Africans, they are not Burkina Fasoians. They are called Burkinabe. So he found us, and then he found my email somehow and wrote me a very long email to say, thank you guys, or thank you for the education. And then he said, I have taught myself to be an Afro, not pessimist. What's the opposite of optimist? Said, I've taught myself to be an Afro-optimist and not an Afro-pessimist. And he says, I taught myself that when I saw what is happening in the 3 countries, one of them, which is my country. And then he says, I realized that it can be done. It's just that all 54 countries, like sheep led to a slaughter, are following the same system that they were given by the colonizer. And we talked about it for those who joined late. You know, it's tied to GDP. What nonsense is that? Gross domestic product. I mean, Nigeria is the largest gross domestic product. I've been to Nigeria, and I'm glad Oladele is here, and he won't chew my head. I normally say, for the largest oil producing country in Africa, and Oladele, you'll tell me in the world they are number what? We have not managed to transform Nigeria.
Number 6, apparently number 6, but I can't say it.
Exactly. we still have not transformed Nigeria from a red hole. It is still a red hole, and somebody has to say it, which is why Nigerians prefer to be outside Nigeria than to be in Nigeria, because the government has not taken that oil and used it to make that country to be equal, English, to be equal to that oil, so that you say it's the 6th in the world, it's number 1 in Africa in terms of oil producing. This is where the standard of living of the people are. This is what an average Nigerian can afford. It's not just Nigeria. Same with South Africa, Ntsiki. That time you were having problems. I got into the studio at 7, so I was checking things. And I was like, which is the richest African country? I actually thought they'll say Nigeria, they say South Africa. Apparently, we have more natural resources than DRC, and I always used to think it's DRC. But where are we with that? Where are we? Because the average African in this country is angry, unfulfilled, hungry, poor. And I mean, we listen to the DA and the ANC and the EFF and whoever else play these semantics and MK arguing amongst one another. And we're just like, at the end of the day, it has not put bread and tea for me at the table. So yes, I think I will leave it at that and bring it back to you, Ntsiki. It's these macroeconomics that we are following: GDP, foreign direct investment, because we are looking for forex. But remember, the more we look for forex, the more we weaken our own currencies, because I'm looking for forex. It's $1 is 18 rands. Can somebody make that make sense? Who decided that? In some African countries, $1 goes up to 1,000 of their currencies. Who decided that? How do countries that depend on us for our natural resources have currencies that are stronger than ours? There are 3 rating agencies. The EFF talked a lot about this in the past. All of them are American. S&P, Standard & Procter, Moody, I forget the third one. They determine the state of your economy, if it's doing well or not, and then your currency should be at this level. So these currencies are decided on a laptop in an office by 3 American-based companies. And then Trump has a nerve, to think that he can point a finger at us and tell us what to do. But then again, he's doing that with the collaboration of some at the table too, which is really sad, because currently there's an unholy marriage happening between Trump and some racist, fundamentalist white South Africans. Fact. That's why when we talk about land without expropriation, Trump answers on their behalf. Where was Trump when we were asking America to boycott apartheid because it was a crime against humanity? Where was America? They did not. They still sided with apartheid to the end. So he stands on no moral ground to be telling us what to do and what not to do. It is our national sovereignty which is denying us. I'll leave it at that and see.
Revolution in the Sahel region is coming as military coups. So in our context, I mean, Nigeria and South Africa are the same. We're both British. So in our context, how would our revolution look like? What would it have to be?
Ntsiki, I've actually thought about that for a long, long time. I've been thinking about this. And based on what's going on in Nigeria today, even the military is compromised. They're in the pocket of the head of state right now. So where that's going to come from in Nigeria right now, I don't know. I'm frustrated because I can't see anything that's going to change Nigeria at the moment, because all the so-called leaders, and I engaged with quite a few. Even I had a conversation with one of the presidential advisors recently, just to get to sound him out in terms of what he's, because he was trying to defend. I said last, I was trying to defend the particular government projects, just to stand out to see where his head's at. And they haven't got he was, like I said last time, he was saying to me that it's better to be outside than be in the government to do something, because if you're in the government, you can't do anything. So in terms of the solution, I think it's going to come from outside. It's going to come with it from the people. The people need to rise. And put in Nigeria's context right now, Nigeria, I've just come back from Nigeria not long ago, and I can see that Nigerians are hungry. I've never seen Nigerians so hungry. And every time I'm in Nigeria, I see hunger all the time. But what's holding them back, I don't know. Because for me, I say, you're already dead anyway. Because some people only eat once a day, some can't eat nothing at all. So basically, you've been pushed to the wall so far. But so when are you going to say enough is enough? So for that revolution to happen in Nigeria, it's going to come from the people. What's going to trigger it, I don't know. But it's on that blink. It might happen at any time. Because they can now, because of the awakening that's going on right now, a lot of people can see that the government are basically not helping them. Basically, they're not their solution. Basically, that, you know, just recently, I've just seen, they just, I think it's about $10 billion or $10 million to fix the roof of the parliament or something like that. 10 million to put solar on the government building. Whereas you have schools, you have hospitals, you have basically, you know, people that serve people. You don't care. The roads are bad, but the priorities are so wrong. So, guys, for me, in Nigeria's sake, I think it's going to come from the people. Something's going to trigger it, but it has to happen at some point, because the military in Nigeria compromised, the government's compromised, so the elites all compromised. Basically, all they think about is what are they going to just keep controlling people. And they've used religion to control us. They've used politics to control us. The education system controls us. Even the food right now, you have the insurgents in terms of the killings, where the people can't go to the farms anymore, because these insurgencies are funded by these elites just to create division. It's all intentional. So to create fear. So I'll say, Nigeria, yeah, it's down to the people. I'm just saying it's down to the people. It's down to the people. The government are not going to do it for us. They're not going to do it for us. That's my honest opinion.
Thank you, Ntsiki. It's such a crucial question. I think firstly, Wes Baker, I think I'm pronouncing it right, says not juntas, please, it's a revolution. Precisely, that's why we are holding Sahel Tuesdays, because we recognize what's happening in the Sahel as revolutions, and we emulate it. We are using that word to say that's what they are called, but are they really that? That's why we are having the conversation. And then Mbali is saying solutions, please. Mbali, I would have thought that you should be typing the solutions as we are talking, because we are actually giving out these solutions as we are talking to you. When we say it starts with territorial integrity, you should already be telling us, not us telling you, that maybe we need to relook at colonial borders and say, do they really serve us? Maybe in some instances, but in some instances, they are not serving. In some instances, they're actually sparking what is called ethnic war. So in those instances, maybe we should be able to relook at that, because they've done it in Eastern Europe, by the way. That's why Yugoslavia fell into 6 countries. They didn't force to keep Yugoslavia together, knowing that it's going to be a perpetual problem. For us, it is forced on us because they enjoy these internal conflicts, these so-called tribal wars. I call them ethnic wars because I don't call our people tribes. I call them ethnicities. So you are wanting solutions. That's maybe where we should be starting. National sovereignty. We should be looking at the religions that we are espousing. I don't know any European country whose national identity is African spirituality. I don't know any, as a matter of fact. That's very scary for me. But I know a lot of nations here whose definition are either Christianity or Islam, and then African. So you are looking for solutions. That's another solution. Maybe we need to ask ourselves. I always say to Africans, who amongst us has dared to look at Africa before 639? 639 is the day when Islam descended on us, CE. Do we know what we looked like before 639? More so, do we even know what we looked like in the time called BCE, before the common era for us, or before Christ for Christians? Because if we do, there are solutions, so many that lie there. I have issued a solution even as I was talking. Patriarchy is not African. But how many men have tuned in here, and women who are listening tonight, who still hold on to patriarchy and will defend it, because that's what's been passed down to us as a social system, and it's been packed with us. So, Ntsiki, you were asking, I thought I should just interact with the audience and answer those questions. But you were asking, what does it look like for South Africa? I agree with Oladele. It is not going to happen from a military. Someone, not me, typed it already and said, we can't rely on our military as South Africa to take us there. It wasn't me. So is many other African countries. So for us, it has to be the will of the people. But guess what? That's why there has been what is called the dumbing down of the average mind. These people are always a step ahead of us. Do you think it happened by coincidence that the pass mark in South Africa was reduced to 33%? Guys, when you have passed something with 33%, it means you know less than what? You know less than what you do not know about that subject, but you've passed. That's a dumbing down of the mind right there, which means they're making sure there shall be no revolution that comes from the masses, because they've made sure that they've reduced the masses to people who cannot think. So there's another solution. Can we interrogate our education systems and see if they're producing Africans or they're producing neoliberalists? Because we spend such a lot of time at school and we pride ourselves in these degrees. That's why me, whenever I introduce myself, Oladele, I say, I am Dr. Khanyisile Litchfield Tshabalala. Can I be frank with you? The only reason I did my doctorate was that when I walk into a room of clever blacks, I'm accepted and people don't say, who's this? But I never did my doctorate for a second to think that it's going to add to the knowledge of self. The things I know about Africa pre-colonially, and that goes as far as BCE, the things I know about my spirituality, the things I know about the true history of my people, the tools I'm using now to analyze the Sahel, to know that it is not coups but a revolution. It's not something I was taught at school. It's not something I got from my undergraduate or my master's or my PhD. As a matter of fact, those taught me the opposite of the things that I know about myself. So I think these are part of the solutions. But I like what Mbali said also. Mbali said there's a lot of African Americans who are reaching out and trying to reunite with the continent so that we have one revolution. Mbali, I fully agree. And please, when you meet them, forward them. That's why we have Oladele on the program. He's in Britain. That's why we have Nduku from time to time. He's based in the US. So yes, we are not seeing the emancipation and the revolution in Africa taking place in isolation from Africans in the diaspora. I like what Bob Marley says. He says, no matter where you come from, as long as you are an African, you are an African. It doesn't matter where you were born. You are an African by blood, by DNA. The spirit in you is African. Even if you were plucked out of your continent 500 years ago against your will, you remain part of us, and we have to do this together. Thank you, Ntsiki. I'll return it back to you.
Thank you. And time flies when you're having a good time. So should we have our closing remarks on what sovereignty means to us? Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Oh, let's quickly plug. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please subscribe to the Moya channel and to Oladele's channel.
The Emerging Equivalent, please subscribe. Please.
Yes, please subscribe. And then obviously we're still waiting for Dr. Kanyi's book, which is busy getting published and printed and everything. So we are punting that for you guys to stay woke, stay alert. All right, so closing thoughts. Let me hand over to you guys.
Okay, let me go, sis. I know you can round up. For me, sovereignty is down to us decolonizing our minds. We need to decolonize our education. We need to decolonize our spirituality. We need to decolonize our agriculture. We need to go back to our own kind of farming. We need to decolonize our health, because basically everything that we embraced from the West is basically not helping us, because it's all allopathic, it's all synthetic, which is not what our creator told us to use. We need to decolonize our health systems. We're talking about sovereignty, security. We need to decolonize it. Economic systems, we need to decolonize. We need to decolonize everything. We need to give to them what they brought to us. Guys, let's build by ourselves. Afro, we can do this. And the key point here is, and what we just said is, the diaspora has the skill set. We need to reach out to our diaspora brothers and sisters, and with those, not because not everybody wants to come back to Africa, but those who are prepared to do the work, let's reach out to them. Let's do the work between the diaspora Africans and the continent Africans. Guys, imagine us. Just imagine us coming together, and this is what they don't want. Just imagine us coming together as a force from the diaspora and the continent together with our abilities and our capabilities, and just say, you know what? Let's just go back to basics and let's build something. We are more than capable of doing that. The only thing that's stopping us is us. And that's because of the colonial mindset that we've embraced. We need to throw that in the garbage bin and let's start being African. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. And we'll definitely see you next week.
Thank you, my brother Oladele. If you don't have territorial integrity, guys, your government will never implement African-based solutions. I hope I can get through to people who think mental slavery comes first. If you cannot defend your territory and your nation, you can decolonize your people mentally all you want, and you can have the best Ubuntu systems. They will just invade you. They will just send the Marines in the morning, and in 3 weeks they shall be done. Why can't we get this through our heads, guys? The only language our enemy understands is military language, which is why they spend so much on the military. Why do you think they do? Because they don't even need the UN to invade you. Where the UN says no, they will do it anyway to get their will. So can we please go back and look at our defense forces? Can we stop letting the defense force be a will of its own, and we don't know what they are doing and how they are spending money? So we need to be able to protect our land. We need to be able to protect our nations so that we can come to implement Africa-based solutions. We can come to the mental decolonization. We can decide who we want to trade with. We can decide the price of our commodities. Do you know we don't even decide the price currently? The person who owns an outlet of Starbucks makes more money per average. It's not even comparable to the coffee bean grower in Tanzania, in Burundi, in Ethiopia, and all those other countries that produce coffee beans. We cannot have all these things for as long as we cannot defend ourselves. At the end of the day, our presidents are scared because they don't want to be taken out, because they don't want to be sidelined, because they don't want disinvestment and all these things, because we have built everything around neoliberalism, because we have no territorial integrity, we have no national sovereignty. Therefore, we don't have self-determination, which is where the soft stuff of the mind and the culture come in. So, Ntsiki, thank you so much for the platform, and thank you to everybody who tuned in. We seem to be attacked more and more. I hope you are aware. We seem to be having more interference than we had when we started, and we did not have a following. So we just need to be mindful of that. And sorry to those who tune in when one of us fall off or Ntsiki cannot hear us. Please understand we have interference. So this is how we shall play it. Whenever that happens, whoever has not fallen off will continue talking. Thank you so much, Ntsiki. And please subscribe to Moya and Emerging Alkebulan. And thank you, Ndugu, an example of Afrocentric sisterhood, because I'm raising funds to self-publish, and Ndugu has decided that she actually will pay the rest of the remaining money so the book can go out. So thank you, Ndugu. You are a true example of sisterhood and the partnership between those in the diaspora and those who are in the continent. Thank you, Ntsiki.
Fantastic, fantastic. Ndugu, if you can put your channel in the comment section so I can put it on screen, that will be much helpful.
Kumbukeni.
Oh, Kumbukeni.
Yeah, Kumbukeni.
That's the other YouTube channel you
Kumbukeni.
Okay, yeah, put it on there so people can thingy. Yeah. You know, on this last word here, so yesterday, I heard our president, because I see that all the bosses, the presidents are meeting, and he mentioned something about a railway line from Cape to Cairo. And as we speak about sovereignty, that's scary because he's talking about that railway line with the same people that we want sovereignty from. So I don't know how far we're gonna get with getting
Yeah,
free.
but guys, don't forget when they build those kind of lines, you know what they're doing. It's basically, you know what they did in the colonial times. They built structures that's going to help them loot your continent. It's not for our benefit; it's for them. When you see roads, you know the one they did in the Zambia as well, the same thing. But people just need to wake up. So we need to see these for what it is. If it doesn't benefit us, like what Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali are doing, it's not for us. It's for them.
Also, what are we doing with a railway line from Cape to Cairo? Cecil John Rhodes' exact words and dream. So Ramaphosa is putting it to life. He is resurrecting the ghost of Cecil John Rhodes. Why are we having a railway line from Cape to Cairo when we are still asking one another to pay visas to visit each other's countries? What's the railway line going to serve if I need a visa? Some of these visas are $180, some are $250. Why are we needing visas to visit one another's countries? Why? So what's the railway line going to help? Also, we don't own our economies. So the railway line is going to facilitate which trade? What are we going to be trading in? Beads. Not that beads, I'm undermining beads, but I mean, why aren't we trading in our natural resources, which we do not own? So what's that railway line really going to achieve, as Oladele say, except to help export our natural resources outside? That's what it's going to save. So can we begin with the trawling? Then we can walk. Can we eradicate the visa? Can we start having sovereignty over our natural resources? Can we start determining the prices? Can we start trading with each other? We don't trade with one another. South Africa trades with whoever via Britain, Burundi via Belgium or France, Zambia via, Mozambique via Portugal. The former colonizer is always in the center. So can we eradicate those things? Then we can start building infrastructure to facilitate that trade. Why are we trying to run before we walk? Because that's how the colonizer has developed us for time immemorial. They are giving us grandiose things that mean nothing to the rest of the poor people. I mean, the cow train in South Africa is what? What does it mean? Per person living in squalor in Alexander or in Orange Farm. The cow train is a mark of prosperity for the few that have, and not for the majority. So, Ntsiki, thank you so much for that question.
I'm looking forward to next week to see what we are unpacking next week. Thank you to everybody who joined us on Sahel Tuesdays, every Tuesday at 8 p.m. We will definitely see each other next week. And thank you so much for joining, or whether you joined us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. We thank you, and we'll see you again next week.